Hallo lieve dames en mensen. Vandaag heb ik een podcast via de Zoom met niemand minder dan Jacob Cooper. Iemand die eigenlijk door een bijna doodervaring zichzelf enorm heeft ontwikkeld op het gebied van regressie, maar ook het omgaan met een bijna doodervaring en werken met het universum. En hij is social worker. Hij is een certified Reiki master, certified hypnotherapist. Hij is gespecialiseerd in past life regression. En als een psychotherapeut werkt Jacob dus met individuele mensen, groepen, familie. En allemaal om zichzelf weer beter te voelen en uit eventuele weerstand te komen. Welkom Jacob. Hi.
Hello, hello. Some of that I was able to understand a little bit. There's
Yeah?
some,
What did
yeah.
you understand?
Well, some of the language is like similar to English.
That's true. That's
Just be able to
true.
pick it up. But thank you so much, Vilna, for having me on, and thank you for listeners for tuning in here today from near and far.
Yeah, because where do you live?
I'm in the United States in New York, so
How is it in New York at this moment?
it's very good. I've been born and raised here. It's all that I know. But what I love to really do is understand that you could be here and I could have clients in Australia, and everyone is tapping into similar things no matter where you are in the world. And it's become such a smaller place, obviously, with technology, but you recognize, the universality that we all share and the spirit that we're all connected to, no matter what culture, religion, wherever you're from, we all have that similar thread that we're all a part of. So it's just amazing to sit back and see that develop throughout the years.
Absolutely. And do you also recognize that there's a shift going on right now? The energy is changing, so people are getting more awake and more in alignment with the universe?
I certainly hope so. I think people with a good foundation are really accelerating during this time and growing and thriving. And those who are not really connected, are having the inverse experience. So I think the highs are higher, but the lows are lower. The extremes, from what I noticed, are more kind of stronger throughout. But the beauty is when you're connected and you're diligent in your practice and you're constantly just looking at yourself and saying, how could I wake up better than I went to bed last night? And you have what's called that growth-oriented mindset, amazing things can happen, because I believe what we don't know is unlimited. What we do know is limited.
Absolutely.
And each day is a new way to really explore that unlimited awareness.
Oh, that's beautiful, because we were raised with the limited version of ourselves.
Yeah.
But our deeper knowledge knows that we are unlimited. So when you tap into that knowledge, then you know it, and then you start to be how you say that, addicted to personal growth, because you know that it brings you the broader awareness that was already in you. You had a really you wrote 2 books, if I'm right.
Yeah, these are both of my books. The Wisdom, Jacob's Ladder, and Life After Breath are both of my books, both published within the span of 3 years.
Oh my God.
At 33 years old, I'm a 2-time published author, which is humbling, rewarding. I've loved, having readers email me from all across the globe. And I wasn't probably supposed to do this. I was a college student and I was put in the lowest possible non-credited classes for reading and writing, my first year in community college. And I was just so determined to be the best student that I can be and worked as hard as I could. And I was graced by having a lot of great mentors. And it reminded me that just because the world saw me as limited in that way, it was not the full picture of what was inside of me. And I just got out of my own way and surrendered to this higher intelligence that helped guide, both of my books.
Wow. And you tapped into that and you trusted it, that it would be just the right information that came through you to inspire other people. Well, but that's really interesting, because not a long time ago, I spoke to a really good scientist and doctor who treated people with heart diseases. And once people were dead, clinical, but they didn't cross over yet, they all came with a beautiful story about the place where they were at, with a beautiful light and a huge awareness, and everything was love and beautiful. And he thought, wow, how's that possible? Because if we're clinical dead, there should not be any consciousness left. And he started to examine that. And during his investigation, he talked to over thousands of people. And he wrote the book Near-Death Experience in Dutch. And
Well,
one of his conclusions was that once you experience a near-death experience, there is a larger spiritual awareness than people who didn't have that experience. And on the other side, that's what we also said in the podcast with him, is that you don't need to have that experience to also awaken in the spiritual consciousness. And that is exactly what you claim in your book, right? Because you had a near-death experience where you were 7, if I'm right, and you walked up on the ladder and you fell.
I was 3 years old, and it's actually right now that we're recording my 30th anniversary this month of my
Oh, you were 3
NDE.
years old.
I was
Wow.
just an infant when I had mine. But it's true. I wouldn't be a public presenter or write books if I didn't think that someone would not benefit from hearing that, as well as the fact that people don't need to have one to remember. My theory is people are tuning into these things because there's something that you're saying that's familiar to people. There's a drop of recollection that people have when they tune in and when they hear near-death experience encounters. It reminds people of where they came from and where they're forever connected to. So we've all lived many lives. I firmly believe we've all died many deaths. We've all had life on the other side. And near-death experiencers are just those gentle reminders, to the human race that there's something much more than just this life. And we're medical miracles, here to just remind you that you're a miracle too. And you're an eternal being. What gets me is when people want to have these things, and I could understand that. I get it. People want to have what you have, but my answer to it is when you really had a profound near-death experience, particularly the one that I had, you recognized how just difficult it could be as well. It's not,
Also to get back here
just
on Earth and live your life again.
yeah, people view it through like rosy, glasses and stuff like that, and I could get that when when they hear the euphoric aspects. My first book, Life After Breath, I really talked about some of the struggle that I had, particularly at such a young age, at how complex my life was,
I can imagine.
having this experience and remembering, hey, I wasn't my body, I wasn't my age, I wasn't, my gender. I was experiencing all these things in this story, but this wasn't the full story of my whole book. This was just a chapter of my story. But
Wow.
eventually I had to learn how to accept, myself in this body in this moment. And this was two things could be true at the same time. Like you could not be that, but in this reality, you are that. And I had to accept the human reality with time and let go of the struggle.
They're also allowing for you to get back where you came from in the near-death experience, because I talked to somebody who had the surgery and became in that field of in between and going over and then came back. And he has been depressed for over 10 years after that, because he said, I had 5, he has 5 children. He had a most wonderful life. He loved his children. But once he'd experienced that universal love, that huge consciousness, universal, the everythingness, like, I don't know,
Right.
whatever you call it. He said, I could not adjust anymore in this life, although I loved my children, I loved everything I did. But it was such a big, huge step for me to get back here.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there's an adjustment time for sure. I mean, you mentioned, someone was flatlined and they had this experience. For myself, a little different. I suffocated due to pertussis, otherwise known as whooping cough, which is for infants, children, even adults, could be fatal if left untreated. And so I had this cough and I just completely suffocated. There was no the analogy I have is like, imagine that you're drowning and you're trying to hold on to a boat and grab onto it. And that's what was happening to me. And I was suffocating. I felt like I was drowning and there's nothing to hold on to. I was like, but there was no breath. And all of my body shut down and my brain literally snapped in half due to the deprivation of oxygen. And once I felt this large crack within my brain, that's when the spirit realm, really was full blown and I crossed over to the other side. So we have sayings, like my brain cracked open. And that's when God came in. I mean, that literally happened to me. So there's the trauma aspect of it. I think many near-death experiencers experience what you're describing, which is like a homesickness for the other side. But I found, within time, I've been able to embody that awareness in this life, through a lot of practices of gratitude, meditation, finding the sacred in all, and recognizing that, heaven's not a destination, but a state of consciousness, and so when you're tapped into your inner self on a deep level, that's connecting, to heaven, because we're not here to create heaven on earth just in itself. We are droplets of heaven here on earth. And when you're connected to your deeper self, there's nothing that could separate you from the other realm. And you don't have to die to get there. So you don't have to have an NDE to have that, like we said. You just have to really connect on a deep level, much like you use your phone, you use Wi-Fi. Where is the Wi-Fi? I don't know. It's all around us. Same thing with the higher consciousness. You can't point to it and say, that's it. Well, that over there is also it. That's it too. That's it too. So
An
it's all things
invisible
that
force
are
that's
their
always
beauty and
around
love.
you. An invisible force that's always around you and in you.
It never leaves you. And so I think it's really getting out of your own way. But I think when you're feeling very heavy, it's hard to amplify your energy.
Exactly.
So I think people, and I've really counseled a lot of people who've had near-death experiences through groups and individuals, which puts me in a unique vantage point because I'm a therapist, but I'm also an experiencer. So I get both worlds, but I understand that really to connect to the spirit realm, it comes out of a place of joy, of love, and you have to really amplify your energy. It's hard to connect when you're so bogged down. Think of yourself in a hot air balloon when you have 1,000 pounds in you. You're not going to rise up. The same thing with the spirit realm. You have to really lighten your energy to really feel, sense, and connect to it.
I always mention if I'm silent here, all the information comes through me.
You got it. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand that completely. What do you think? Because we have an author here who is really experienced and a specialist in regression and traumatized people. He always says, if you experience something in this world, it's because you have to end the trauma of the past lives. So when you said you were coughing and choking,
Suffocating. Yeah.
suffocating, yeah, sorry, was that, could that have been that you were having a death experience in an earlier life where you were suffocating but could not process yet that you were leaving to the other side,
Right.
that you have to relive it here, your soul, to do what you do now? Do you believe in that it's
Well, I mean, I certainly specialize in past life regression work, with hundreds of clients or groups and individuals. Regarding my NDE, what I'll tell you is that it was karmically based, like everything else that we go through in life. Yes, when you have past life regressions, you recognize that we're eternal. If anything else, people don't have to have NDEs. You could be regressed to remember that you've died before and you've moved on. My NDE had a component of past life memories to it, which is something that I don't see as much. You would figure like you would see more of those. They are out there, but not like as common as I would think. But my last lifetime, I do believe, was very much correlated to my near-death experience, where I had recollection of a lifetime in which I'm not going to use commit suicide because that criminalizes mental health and behavior, and not all suicide is mental health. Some could be physical conditions, and it's different scenarios. But essentially, I was suffocated on a metaphorical basis in that lifetime where I just felt there was no hope. And I saw no end in sight to my suffering. And this has been evidentially read by many different intuitives prior to myself ever becoming public about my experience, which gave me that incredible validation,
Yeah.
of what I experienced. But then I saw my NDE was kind of like that too, where I felt that same playbook, right? My back was against the wall. There was no life to hold on to. The human breath was taken from me. But once I let go of my human breath in suffering, I surrendered to the breath of eternity. I surrendered to God. And I am from the Jewish faith, and the word for spirit in the Jewish religion is ruach, which means the breath or the wind of God. And
Mm.
so when my own breath was taken away, I was able to just surrender to the breath of God. And that was a lesson karmically for myself, not only individually, because individual and collective are connected,
Yeah.
me and the we. So for my clients that are really suffering, I work on them finding ways to surrender, to a higher intelligence, accepting what is, but understanding that when you're having intensity of darkness, it could be a reminder of the great light that stands behind that. So I
Absolutely.
look at any transformative experience as a dark night of the soul with the capacity to transcend your pain, into a life-altering experience if you tap into it enough.
Absolutely. And you were 3 years old. Did you have brothers or sisters?
I have brothers and sisters. Yeah, they're all one of four other siblings. So one of five actually. So I have a big family.
You have a big family, and you were the only one, I presume, that had this experience when you were 3 years old.
Yeah.
And how did you climb that ladder, that Jacob ladder? Because you were 3 years old,
Mhm.
instantly in a different awareness, in a different consciousness, where you knew you were part of a bigger, larger uh, eternity. And
Right.
and how did you manage? Because I can imagine that during your school period, primary school and high college, or I don't know where you went to, high school, college, whatever, that that you must also have felt lonely or different, or I don't know.
Oh, yeah. I mean, certainly life after breath, I really discussed that. I mean, I was one of five kids, and I was by far the most difficult child of them all. We
Yeah.
all ate there's black sheeps in families, sure, but I was a big outlier. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that I was connected. I was connected to my soul when this world wanted to just put me into this pen of this point of a pen.
Narrow-minded.
Yeah, and the suffocation didn't stop at my NDE. I felt like I was suffocated for many years because I kept this quite close to myself. My father told me, like, a little bit after my NDE, I came up to him and I said, "Dad, remember when I was rushed to the hospital, something happened. One day will make sense to you, but right now it won't." So in other words, it was so sacred to me that the English language or any language did not do justice. So I didn't even bother talking about it. I held it quiet for 2 decades. It wasn't until I read a book that was gifted to me from someone who also had a near-death experience that everything clicked, that, wow, this was a term which was really made by my good friend, Dr. Raymond Moody, who really coined the term near-death experience in the 70s, but that other people had this. I wasn't the only one. And so once I was able to really understand what I had and have a term behind it and see that other people had it, it helped me really own what I have. But throughout most of
Don't
my
judge. You
childhood and
didn't judge it
teenage.
anymore. You didn't fear for it anymore. You were free. There was nothing left to
Right.
stop it.
Well, I understood that much of life isn't to hold on to, but to let go.
Uh,
And so I had this experience that I was holding on to so much, this gift that I had, and I recognized when you're holding on to a gift, it's almost like a burden, but you let it go, it becomes a beautiful symphony.
Which is
And
very interesting, because the suffocating is the area of the throat chakra where the
right,
expression of the self
right.
needs to get out. So probably this has also been a traumatized area, because there was where the near-death experience took place. And after
Yeah,
that, you still held it in, but it needed to be expressed. It needed to get out. So
right.
that was also the lesson, I think, of this area, to let yourself be free and
And
express yourself.
express. Yeah, and and I think a lot of people, they just, I mean, I see some people, they feel like they have a near-death experience and they own heaven, they own the other side, and it's all about them. But when you have an NDE, you recognize, that really life is about giving back to others. It's not all about you. And you don't own heaven. You're here to remind people of what they already know. Jesus himself would say, the kingdom of heaven that's in me is in you too. And so it's just a mirror for what people already know deep down. And
Mm.
hopefully through my example and through, my story, people could just remember it. But yeah, it was complicated. It wasn't until I recognized the beauty of the ripple effect that this experience had. But from a personal level, it was challenging. Like, I just wanted to be quote unquote normal, and imagine like a beach ball that you try to push down in the water and try to bury it, but eventually
Or
it
pop
always
up.
comes back up. Like, through this experience, it was a brain trauma. And as we know, the brain is a filter between the two worlds. So I was very much tapped in on a very high level, from a very young age through this experience. And so I would see things, hear things, know things very easily. And it became very like obtrusive and annoying to the life that I was trying to live. I'm like, just, stop seeing these things. I
Yeah,
just want
let me be normal.
but
Just
I would see things before they happen, and they happen in front of me, and I'm like, they call it premonitions, but I just wanted to live a life unbothered by all these things. But then once I was able to understand what these things were, it helped. But I want to go back. You mentioned that, I had this when I was 3. How did I handle it? And on a human level, yeah, that was that was hard. But spiritually, crossing over to the other side, what I could say is I was not a 3-year-old. The soul is not congruent with chronological age. A soul experiences itself in this body in chronological age, but a soul is timeless. So this was an experience of my soul. But then when I had to come back to this body, I had to kind of learn how to integrate that. And that was the challenge.
every soul has to find a way to fit into that narrow form of,
Bob,
that we
yeah.
call a body. And I can imagine if you experienced in a conscious way the other side, and you come back in a conscious way, because we're not conscious of it, we
Mm,
don't have that experience. And well, I had one when I was my mom was giving birth to me, and I found out in regression that I was one of a twin
mm,
soul. And
wow.
my brother left this physical world before everybody even knew I was one of a twin. But the moment that my mom was going to give birth, I turned around and got the, how do you call that? The navelstreng. I don't know how you call it what is the connection between mom and the child?
Oh, I see, the umbilical cord.
Yeah, the
That's
umbilical cord that was wrapped around me. So I also had no oxygen.
wow.
Yeah, and
Mm,
I almost died. I came in this world purple, so I choose to come. But the man who I talked to who was the expert, said that is a near-death experience. So the reason why you as a child saw things, had new things, saw everything in a bigger picture, is probably because of that. The funny thing is that when time passed, every time that something happened to me, it was in this area. I
wow.
felt, yeah, I fell through glass. A piece of glass got in my throat. I had a vein. The main vein was cut through. I almost died again when I was
Wow.
9 years old. Later on, my tongue got paralyzed for half of the tongue, and
Mm,
I had a lot of voice issues, always different difficulties with the voice. So I think that my soul invited me, and I was always homesick, always, till I was 17. I always wanted to go. I didn't know where to, but I knew I wasn't safe in
mm,
this world. I felt not safe. So as soon as I went to a party, birthday party of girlfriends with a sleepover, they needed to come and pick me up because I couldn't do it. I was so afraid,
wow.
so homesick. And those are all signals later I understood, of a near-death experience, right? That you're homesick or feel that you belong to something else, but you cannot. I couldn't know. I was a baby. I didn't even know what happened to me.
Right.
And but I was always well, exactly what you say. I felt different. I felt different. And I coped. I coped by adjusting to the choices people made that were not for me logical and normal, but okay, if everybody else is doing it, then probably it is okay.
Mm,
Until I started to live my real truth. And I just went back to that place where I knew instead of wanting. It was
right.
knowing. And that's the journey. That's the journey.
Yeah.
But all the things that happened in between, I believe my soul wanted me to remind me of that.
Mm.
Bring it
Oh,
back.
sure. I mean, your body, as the book says, your body keeps a score, and we hold a lot of experience and trauma within different parts of the body. Some parts of the body have stronger ties on a deeper level to messages and areas and strong points, much as the earth has different galactical alignments that have stronger energetic points. The same thing with our energetic bodies, our acupressure, meridian points. It all, is connected to some strong points. But I think where our pain lies behind it is our purpose.
Hmm.
Many times we experience a lot of trauma and pain in certain areas, physically, socially, emotionally. Behind that is a lot of our degree of purpose. But you make a great point that this life is a one-way ticket back home, but sometimes when you have a near-death experience, it's like you go back there and you come back here, and it's complicated. But hopefully the idea for experiencers and non-experiencers is to remind yourselves that you really can never leave home. You're always, connected it. This is a temporary experience, and through the deepening of the experience, you recognize you don't have to die to get there. You're connected through awareness.
My,
It's
my,
like the Wizard of Oz, where Dorothy clicks her heels and there's no place like home. And she never left her bed the whole time. It was just all a dream. And life is like that too. We think we're a million miles away from heaven, but this is all a dream. And we come back to that place. So we're connected to that place. And
very reassuring, I think, if people hear this. My
yeah,
mantra right now is I have all the time in the world because it's never ending. I have all the time. And if it doesn't work out in this life the way I think it should work out,
right,
then that's okay because I have all the
right.
time and it happens just as it should happen.
Yeah,
So what do you think of, well, let's say the indoctrination of the, or the hypnosis of the collective conscious mind that says we have to have success, we have to make sure
right.
that we're good at something, and we can have failures, and if you fail, you're
Sure.
not good enough. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these are I refer to as cultural myths that we inherit within, and it's not every culture that has this. Some cultures value different things, but Carl Jung, if you're familiar with Carl Jung, he was someone who still he passed away maybe 100 years ago, but he's still ahead of his time. But he talked about the two phases of life, the morning of life and the afternoon of life. And Carl Jung spoke about the morning, how it was about, the ego and success and having all these things. And once you live out that morning, you're like, I'm in mourning because that wasn't good, that wasn't enjoyable, that wasn't sustainable. And then hopefully within this life, you don't have to go to a later point in your years. Chronologically, you could experience the afternoon of life where it's about the being, the joy, the love that you experience.
Wow.
And so I think sometimes people have to experience this in their own level to understand what they've been taught was wrong in a way. But it doesn't take courage to fit in and to be normal. It takes courage to challenge the norms. So I think it takes an empowered, courageous souls. But from a very early age, we've been disempowered. Our trajectory is hey, we are what you think we see you as, and we want to implement our worldview onto you. So you're a boy, you're a girl, you're a name, you're an age, you're this blank canvas. So we're going to create our drawing onto you, and that's going to be your box of identity.
Mm.
And when you're tapped into spirituality, you're able to look at that box, and you could keep that box, or you could say, geez, in order to really find myself, I have to lose myself, and that's a vulnerable task to do.
Mhm.
But for many people to find a new world, you have to let go of a world and recognize what you've been taught. Not all, but a lot of things just are not sustainable. And I deal with clients all the time who have checked off every box that they've been told, and they are still miserable. And that's called a midlife crisis.
Absolutely.
So it just does not work. It may be temporary satisfying, but it's like whack-a-mole where you're always trying to chase that next thing because you're looking for all these things outside yourself. And the near-death experience personifies, that all things that you're looking for are right within your backyard. They always were. You just have to get over the cultural myth that has been so ingrained in our psyches.
Hmm. So how do you, because you are challenging the status quo as much as I think as the same as I do in the Netherlands.
Right.
I'm telling people that they are self-healing power, that they're more than they think they are. I do healing retreats, and well, I might say it took some courage also, because there are
Right.
like people who judge it, who even want to cancel you or make fun of you.
Sure.
How do you cope with that? Do you also experience that, or is
Oh,
that different?
sure. I mean, as I say, if you're not popping, they're not hating,
Mm.
so hate away, because it's a
Yeah, that's
sign
how it
that
is. Yeah.
your light is intimidating their insecurities, and what you're tapping into is something that they don't currently experience. And they're doing everything and they're miserable and they're looking at you like, why are you so I, it doesn't phase me, but people will come, what I've understood, whether it's culturally, religiously, psychologically, people have a unique relationship with things that are outside their box. You could either embrace those things and see that, oh, maybe that's not something that I see, but I could learn from that a little bit, or that they could try to bully you. So you look at this world, you're in the Netherlands, I'm in the United States. There was a time where it was seen as flat, and that's what the cultural consciousness was. And people challenged that. They were ridiculed. They were like, what are you talking about? And they dared to explore more than what they were taught and more than what they knew. And they found a whole new world that was not flat, that was round. I'm not talking about the idiots who still believe that the world is flat. That's not my focus here.
I
But for the
understand. Yeah.
vast majority of people who aren't delusional and have a sense of reality, it's through exploring worlds that we don't know that we could really expand our world. So I think the point of emphasis for a lot of people is people are going to come to you at their own level of awareness. Hurt people try to hurt people, and it has nothing to do with you. But just kind of focus on your light. Don't try to resist other people or change people. Just be a good
Convince people.
surfer and stay
No.
in your lane.
That's exactly how I deal with it. My husband has been in the hospital a few years ago. He had a really bad accident. And the doctors were really amazed by the healing I did, because he was supposed to be staying coma or not being functional ever in his life again. He had a lot of brain damage. And because of the healing, he was out of the hospital in 10 days.
Hmm.
And then the neuroscientist came up to me. He said, "What did you do?" Because he's a miracle, a magical miracle. And I said, "Well, he's not a miracle. He's a self-healing power." And I just touched his emotions, and I knew where to work on with him. And I did some energetic work. And she said, "Wow, there's a lot we don't know yet." And I said, "Well, you know a lot, but there's
Hmm.
also another domain where if we connect together, we can use that for the better good for the people, so that everybody can profit from this." And then I said, "If you would like to know more, I read a book, I give education about it,
Right.
just come and join me." And she said, "Well, I'm sorry, I don't have time for that." And then everybody said to me, "You should go to the hospitals and do your readings and tell all about it, so they can also blend it in the medical science that they use
Right.
right now." But there was a knowing in me that said, "Okay, I can put a lot of energy in trying to convince people that they are living a paradigm
Right.
that is not yet open enough to receive that new information,
Sure.
or I can just spread the word, and the doctors will come in my to my events,
Right.
because then they're ready, and that's exactly what is happening right now. So
Yeah.
that's really nice if you just stay focused, exactly as you say. And that helped me. That
Thank you.
incident there helped me to stay in line and just go on with what I do and stay a believer in have trust and faith, because I know the universe is there to help us. Why do you think we need to spread the word, Jacob? Why do you think you and I are doing this?
I don't know. I think it really has to do with connection. When you are connected to the divine, you recognize that experiencing and knowing divine isn't outside of you and it's inside of you, but it's about the embodiment of the divine and knowing the DNA of the divine. Certainly for myself, the divine was, or God, whatever you want to call it, was the ultimate giver of life. And it was reminded of the eternal giver of life. And so it was about service. It was about giving. I think there's many types of people. There's takers and givers, and sometimes we vacillate and we have gray area between the two of them. You can't give if you're not taking, sure, but then it's your worldview. Are you focused more on taking or more on giving back? And so I think people who are connected to the divine, they embody it, they live it. And it's really about making this world a better place, giving over. And it's not just about just taking. So I think it's people who are connected. They're not focused on what they get, but they're focused on the difference that they make in the lives that they reach. The important part is to take the ego away and to recognize that people will understand you at their level of consciousness. Sometimes people, no matter what you say, you can implode in flames and they still will be crossing their legs, their arms, their everything. And that just has to do with a place of psychological protection from where their level are at. But you just have to plant the seed and allow people to harvest what you've provided them. But it's like, for instance, you were speaking Dutch, in the intro. It's a new language just to a lot of people. It's not a new language at our core, but on a human level, it is. It's an old language that we know. But I could be speaking Dutch, and if someone doesn't want to know Dutch and they just want to know English, then they're not going to learn it. So they have to be open to this new way of living, a new way of seeing things. And most people, they just want to be stagnant. They don't want to change. And the devil that they know is what they turn to instead of what they don't know many times.
Beautifully said. So do you do individuals, groups, readings, or do you have a lot of activities? You
Yeah,
write?
I do a lot of like major conferences. This upcoming year, I'm doing like two major conferences in the US, particularly with the grief population. I work very closely with organizations that specialize in helping, families and loved ones who have had, individuals cross over. So I work closely with those particular groups. So we're
That
having,
must be so beautiful to do that, because you give healing to the people. You bring them peace at mind, because then they know my loved one who has disease is still here with me, because
right.
you're bringing them that healing, I think.
Yeah. And, it's like, I try not to take any like ownership of it. My theory on healing is people have the healer within themselves too. Just kind of like start up that car and they are able to drive it a little bit, but it's all in them. But they have to be in spirit. You have to be inspired. You have to really uplift your energy field. And when you're looking at nature, when you're looking at someone that you really aspire to be, it's all just reflections of what you already have within yourself. That's why you're drawn to it.
Yeah.
So I stopped looking at myself as someone who's outside of a person, and just, when my light enhances, my hope is that it wakes up the inner light of someone else.
Yeah, beautiful. And so you do conferences. I called them readings, but I meant conferences. And
Conferences, and I have my own podcast, The Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. Trying to work on my third book coming up. So, uh, I try to
you
keep
also
busy.
go overseas, or only in the US?
I'm
USA.
open to that as a possibility. I have done stuff in Canada, which I don't count that as another. That's like right next door. I'm trying to open myself up to that. I'm trying to manifest that. So certainly, if you know of personalized venues within your area, the Netherlands, or that's a very special place to my heart. I was watching a movie, forget what it's called, but it's based on a true story. I'm Jewish and I come from, family members that were killed, obviously, in the Holocaust. But there was a story, I believe, of a medical doctor, I forget what it was called, in the Netherlands, who had a hospital, and he saved like hundreds of Jews, within the Netherlands. And I forget the name of the movie. But yeah, I know the Dutch were quite kind, to the Jews, and that's what it's about. Abraham from the Bible was on one side of the river and everyone else was on the other side. So when you're in touch with truth and convicted to it, it doesn't matter what everyone is doing outside of you. You tap into it regardless of what people's around is doing around you. And I think people have to live more that way. Tap into it despite what everyone else is doing around you. Because right now, there's a lot of mischievous behavior. People are not connected and people are buying into all this stuff. But just because someone next to you is doing it does not mean that you have to. You don't have to be a leaf in water. You got to generate your own current, though.
Do you know what the name Vilna means?
Well, there was a great rabbi called the Vilna Gaon. So it just means like believe like a bear of wisdom or something like that, or someone who's like an enlightened being. Is that it? Because I know the Vilna Gaon was a great
Really?
Jewish rabbi,
Yeah,
very, very famous.
because maybe there's the connection also between us, your Jewish background. And I don't know if I'm a Jew because it must have been then
Right.
earlier because I wasn't raised Jewish.
Sure.
But somebody who was Jewish came up to me and said, do you know Vilna, what the meaning of Vilna is? And I said, well, no, my mom read a book and she found the name and she said, this is Vilna. And he said, well, during the war, there were a lot of Jewish people put in ghettos.
Yes.
And one of the ghettos was named Vilna by the Jewish people. And they called it the city of hope. Vilna was the city of hope. And they made a song, a Yiddish song. And you can still find it on YouTube. And it touched me so deeply. And now when you say that the Dutch people were very nice to Jewish people.
They were heroic, yes.
Yes, I do feel a connection there between us, and I don't know yet how it will manifest. But I can imagine that that maybe we can exchange some knowledge and find each other in that manifestation that is happening. I don't know yet in which form, but I always trust the process.
Yeah.
But something happened when you mentioned it, and then I thought, oh, he's Jewish, the ghetto, Vilna, and Jacob. I don't know.
One of the greatest Jewish leaders of all time, like I said, was named Vilna. He was a brilliant, brilliant mind. His name is called the Vilna Gaon. Look him up. He was.
I will.
I saw your name. I was like, wow, is she Jewish? Because Vilna is very, very Jewish. But hope, yes, that's needed. Hope, faith, and knowing.
Wow.
That's needed. But yeah, I know I have friends of mine who have presented in Copenhagen, which I know has a lot of different presenters, and they talk about spiritual stuff. So I'm manifesting stuff over there. I've had a couple different interviews, in Denmark before online. So it seems like a spot that I gravitate to.
There is something on the roll right now. Yeah.
I don't like fish though, so I may have to have different kind of food there because I know fish is like such a big.
Go back in Denmark.
Yeah. Fish and herring and all, I don't know, all that stuff.
Well, in the Netherlands, we also have meat and elf vegetables.
Yeah, there was a documentary series called Somebody Feeds Phil on Netflix, and he went to, I believe, Copenhagen, and he talked about all the culinary beauty that was there and stuff like that. So it made me like want to go that much more. Yeah.
Oh wow, well, beautiful. Yeah, I think it's gonna happen anyway. We'll see what happens. Jacob, before you go, because you have to leave, I know, is there something that you would like to say to the viewers and the listeners that could maybe inspire them or bring them hope or peace or whatever yeah, can you do that?
Yeah, during the discourse, I didn't, certainly you could check out my books, Life After Breath, Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder, both available on Amazon, Kindle and paperback. But why I say that is I didn't get fully into my NDE, so I would suggest, reading those books so you could learn a little bit more. But one thing that I learned in my NDE is we all have a guardian angel, and we all are connected to angels around us. And I saw this full blown in my NDE. So I think it's important for people to be empowered in their spirituality. Sometimes we look at religious teachers or luminaries as having a monopolization, ownership of it. But I want to tell you is that we all have a guardian angel. We all have angels around us. So communicate with your guardian angel. You may not even know their names. At the time of my NDE, I saw their names, and now I just call them the guides. But just kind of like ask your guides and just ask them to kind of like show you stuff and be there with you. And the power of attention towards your intention is so pivotal in the spirit world, and so if you're feeling just very heavy or lost, ask and you shall receive, as they say, but form a relationship. Even if you feel it's a dialogue in your head, psychologically there's beneficial components. And people who, if all this is a farce, which is not, no, obviously there's evidence to all the stuff that we're talking about, but if all this is not true, psychological studies has proven that those who believe in the afterlife have a much easier time living in the daily life, particularly when it comes to grief. So belief in something more than this reality helps with life as well as grief. So if anything else, believe, and finding a different way to view that box and to really surrender and just kind of notice what you feel and experience. You may be amazed with some of the messages and healings that take place with that relationship and communication.
Wow, that's a great tip and very practical. Everybody can do that.
Talk to your guide and ask. And if people have questions, could find me jacoblcooper.com, as well as the Wisdom
Jacob
Jacobs.
L. Cooper?
jacoblcooper.com. And I'm on Instagram, Jacob Cooper LCSW, Facebook as well. And my podcast, The Wisdom Jacob's Ladder, is on YouTube and all platforms. So
Do you also give online workshops or online
down the road, not I do a lot of different talks, which are, recorded. So you could view my podcast, and there's a lot of different talks that I do, and they'll continuously be uploaded. So, people could find a lot of guidance there too.
All right. Well, perfect. And maybe we can do a webinar in the future, in the near future. We can do a webinar together.
I would love that. I mean, I do give what's called continuing educational training for professionals through therapists and different professionals. So that part I do in the United States, and I talk about near-death experiences and how it's important for the medical and psychological community to really know about these things and know how to handle clients that come your way, because that's very significant.
So then we'll meet again.
Absolutely. Thank you, Vilna. Thank you for giving me hope and for all that you do. And we'll stay in touch. And who knows, maybe I could see you one day in the homeland. Yeah.
That's what I'm manifesting. So thank you so much, Jacob, for all your
God
time,
bless.
your love, and your beautiful wisdom. And see you soon, maybe. Bye-bye.
Amen. We will. Thank you.
Amen. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.